Hey everybody, welcome back to Everything Under the Sun. And as you know, we've been doing this lately with our little bonus segment, a little additional material for you behind the scenes. And I wanted to bring Don back because one of the things all of us do is we talk about our top five this or our top five that. And what better to do that with than this man right here? He's been interviewing people for over 25 years now. As you've heard, he's been toured around the world. So let's get into it. Don, how you doing back? Welcome back.
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me
Let's
on for
get
this
into it.
bonus thing. We'll see what we can get
Let's
into.
just get right into the. We'll leave the music because that could be very debatable.
Sure.
So we'll go into something that I don't know anything about, but only you. Your top five interviews of all time. If you want to go 5 to 1, 1 to 5, it's up to you.
I just start with the number one, which I mentioned to you before, would be George Carlin. Having the opportunity to interview him was huge for me. I mean, as we talked about before, I mean, for a while I covered music weekly. I was interviewing comedians, so I talked to like all the guys coming through, Jokers and Wileys at the time, but also
Whoa!
some.
We don't say that J word. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But everybody coming through town. So I've interviewed. I haven't interviewed Chappelle. He's like the white whale, but I've interviewed every in Seinfeld, but almost every other comedian you can think of I've talked to over the years. Sadly, I don't cover that beat anymore. We don't cover that beat anymore, which is unfortunate in the paper. But I love comedy, so it was great to get a chance to talk to people. But interviewing George Carlin was great. He was just so cool, and of course, his wife was from Dayton, so he had a soft spot from Dayton anyway,
Right.
and something to talk about besides just slogging around doing comedy. So that was huge. I mean, he's a big name, and to have him be so cool was definitely big. So I would say that would be number one. Number two would definitely be Chuck D from Public Enemy.
Oh, yeah.
Getting to interview him, and a lot of the stuff I do is over the phone. I actually interviewed him in person here when he was in town, so that was really cool. I got to talk to him about a lot of stuff. But to me, Public Enemy is the greatest rap group of all time. So it was amazing, and he was super cool too. And it so happens that a buddy of mine from high school is an engineer and actually worked on a couple of his records, and worked with Puff Daddy and it did that Jimmy Page Godzilla song back in the day. My buddy Paul Logus is a Centerville High School grad, but so we had a connection. So it's always good if you can break the ice with somebody.
Right.
And again, with the Carlin thing, it was like I think it's the ones that I made a connection with people, I guess, that resonate more. Another one that comes to mind, which was huge, was Art Garfunkel, who, I mean, I love Simon and Garfunkel, grew up on it. My mom loved Simon and Garfunkel. For my 21st birthday, I got the vinyl box set of all the Simon and Garfunkel records. Uh, he was just so cool, and he had a younger kid at the time, as I did. So again, we kind of connected on like just beyond the music level, I felt. And I may be kidding myself. He might just be just a super nice guy, but to me, it resonated, and it felt
Right.
like it transcended just somebody trying to sell a record or
Uh-huh.
promote an event. And so that was huge for me. Jonathan Richman, when he came through to perform at Canal Street, I got to interview him. He was the leader of the Modern Lovers in the 70s, very influential group. One of the guys went on and played in the Cars. One of the guys was in Talking Heads. But he was the genius and the songwriter, and he still makes crazy, great records. But that to interview somebody that you've looked up to since a teenager like that, and still to this day I still love, was a great one too. And this is another one that's in the same boat. This guy named Jad Fair that I don't know how many people know, but he's also a genius songwriter, indie rock guy. And interviewing him was like a bucket list thing because I've listened to his records so many times. He had a band called Half Japanese, East Coast guys, and they did a lot of home recording stuff. Great, short, weird songs, catchy songs, just awesome. So I would say those would be my top five.
I have an honorable mention. When I lived in Boston, I became a big fan of Monster Mike, a blues player. And your article with him when he played Jillies was one of my favorite articles that I ever read. Just my point. Okay.
I remember talking to him. Yeah, that's a good record actually when he came through on that.
Yeah, Jillies is another venue that we should talk about
Oh
at
yeah,
some point.
absolutely.
Lo, if you want to go there, you already said Canal Street. Performing or covering besides Canal Street, any other your favorite venues?
Well, I mean, Jilly's is another one. You mentioned Jilly's, and Jerry was a sweetheart. and just a legend. The people he brought to this town,
Oh,
mind blowing. I mean, to playing a show at Canal Street was great, but it was like it was a big deal to do a show at Jilly's. Like it meant something because it was the jazz club and it was a little different,
and blues.
and it's a little bigger in blues too. Yeah, as well, a lot of blues. But if you can, bring, but they did a lot of rock too, but it was primarily jazz and blues. But if you could bring a good rock show in there, it was a big show and it was a lot of fun. And I just love that guy. I interviewed him many times. Toward the end, well, not even toward the end, the last like 15 years or so, he would just like, hey, I got some stuff to drop off. He'd call me. I'm coming now. And he'd come out and he'd honk. And I'd run out to the street because I work at home. I've worked at home for 20 years or whatever. And I would run out to the street and he'd give me this packet of stuff. And I'm like, my neighbor's got to think this is like some weird drug deal from some old Italian guy. Like, what is going on?
Who are you going to go hit? Who's he dropping the money off for you to go
one is
hit?
in this old manila folder, but he would drop me CDs and stuff all the time off. But it was just so endearing, because like I'm not going to make the guy learn the internet and how to do this. It's like, all right, man, come to my house. It's great to see you. But he wouldn't hang out long. He'd just drive off. But that was another one. But I mean, clubs come and go. Like there was a while where Elbows was a thing that was a lot of fun. I went to a lot of good shows there. Like I mentioned the Building Lounge before. There was a lot of fun times I had there.
God, it just went out of my main the club we were talking about upstairs. Don't worry about it. I forgot. McGuffey's. Yeah,
I've been to a lot of shows there. I never actually have played a show at McGuffey's. That's one of the places in town I have not. But I've seen some good shows there. But try to think. I mean, just so many. Yellow Cab is doing some cool things today. Brightside is a really great venue, and they have a multi-purpose thing, but they're great people over there and great place. So there's no shortage of people that want to support great music in this town. It's sometimes a chore to get people out that aren't friends and family and other musicians to support it. That's a whole other thing to complain about, but that's it's tough to get people out.
Well, speaking of comedy, real quick, I asked the comics this when I had them on. I'll ask you: you toured? You've toured pretty much. Would you say from 1982?
About 84. I mean, it took us a while before we were ready to take the show out of Dayton.
Did you have that moment when you were out on the road? That moment where you were like outside of Dayton, out of your friends, where you were like, okay, we can do this. We're pretty good. You got that approval from the crowd.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's super validating. I mean, that's one of the great things you really don't know because you can play to your friends all day long.
Do you remember that moment, that first time?
I can't pinpoint the actual moment, but I very well know that feeling for sure. I mean, it would have been with the New Creatures the first time because, I mean, there was no like real network of touring like there is now.
Right.
Of clubs and stuff like that. Like Black Flag, Minutemen, Sonic Youth, groups like that built that thing up. Before those groups in the 80s, it didn't exist. It was like a whole other world, So when we first did the New Creatures thing, we, by the seat of our pants and a map, just figured this stuff out, cold call people. We didn't even have an album, but we did shows in Nashville. We played in Chicago. We, like I said, played up in Boston and down south and went around. And very early on, you're like, oh, and we played in Lexington a lot. And we used to play this gay club called the LMNOP. And they did a lot of punk shows. And it was wild because it was like 2 floors and they'd have drag shows going on and punk shows going on.
A lot of stories of punk shows back in the early 80s was of drag shows where they played drag shows. Okay, I'm getting off the topic.
1470. I played 1470. A lot of shows there.
Yeah, 1470. Okay, we're getting off topic. I got to keep going here. Okay, now here's what's great about this band. He literally does cover every genre of music, and he has, as you found out, loves every genre of music. So let's get into it.
Okay.
I'm going to do mine. My favorite hip hop album of all time is Beastie Boys' License to Ill. I think it took the old school and led us into the new school. So, 2 white guys, Mr. Thrasher,
okay.
Your top 5 favorite hip hop albums of all time.
Okay. Well, Public Enemy is definitely my favorite. It Takes a Nation of Million to Hold Us Back is the record for me. It does everything I love in that kind of. I mean, it's powerful. It's got great beats. It's very experimental, but there's messages and everything. There's smart guys talking about smart stuff, but then you got Flavor Flav who comes in and lightens things up. So there's like a playfulness to it that you don't often get in like serious hip hop, and he kind of tempered Chuck D a lot, which is good. Sometimes you wonder, why is this guy hanging out here? But too much preaching can be rough. So
Right.
they struck that balance, but the music was what was so powerful too, not just the lyrics, but the music. So number one for me is that. I mean, Public Enemy is like the Beatles of that whole thing for me. Number two for me is Beastie Boys, but I'm gonna go Paul's Boutique. I wasn't crazy about License to Ill when it came out. I was a Run DMC fan, and I much preferred what they were doing to what the Beastie Boys were doing. But when Paul's Boutique came in, and I bought that cassette at Gem City Records, I was like, what in the world? And that's like sampling is the thing that I love so much about that. If you heard my solo thing, the Crossfade Rivals, I mean, there's sampling and weird stuff in there. It's an art form. I mean, some people say it's just retreading other people's songs, and it can be, but the best of it is far from that.
Right.
It's like collage, musical collage in a way, which is something I'm very into. Art collage, like physical collage and audio collage. But Paul's Boutique is just a masterpiece. But any Beastie Boys record, I love License to Ill now. I love it.
You can take Fight for Your Right off of that.
Yeah, it's been played too much, but great record, great songs, and I love those guys. I'm a huge Beastie Boys fan. Those guys are geniuses. And, you know, when Check Your Head came out, they were the biggest group on the planet.
Yeah.
I mean, there was nobody bigger as far as I'm concerned.
No.
Nobody. But just great. So what do we got at number three? Kanye West. I don't care what anybody says. He's a genius. He's an asshole. He's an idiot. But My Dark, Beautiful, Twisted Fantasy, amazing. There hasn't been a better hip hop record made in 20 years. Kendrick is good, but what Kanye does, taking all these different producers and put it together, and he's full of hooks. I'm a hook guy. And every Kanye song, 15 hooks, easy. He's a king of the vocal hooks. He's a genius. The last living rock star, in my book. There's nobody else he does all that. You know, he's getting divorced from Kim Kardashian, but supermodel, whatever she is, like same thing. There's not really supermodels anymore that people care about. She's the equivalent of what Mick Jagger would have dated back in the day.
Yeah.
So he, to me, is that guy. His later records I like, but that record, crazy. The Chris Rock thing I can do without. That spoken word thing, stupid. But the rest of the record, 100% perfect.
I love his gospel out. The latest gospel album.
He's good. I mean, the guy's good. He can do it, and he's a musician. Like, he's got a great musical mind. So, you know, his personal stuff, you got to leave that to the side.
Yeah.
Number four, De La Soul.
Oh yeah.
3 Feet High and Rising. That record blew my mind when it came out. And it's still, like, it's not on streaming. There's so many samples and stuff on there. Like, you can't get it on Spotify. Like, if you don't have that record, and I have it on vinyl and CD, and it's on my computer. But that record is amazing as far as what Prince Paul did and what those kids did. Like, just youngsters,
Right.
just, like, expressing themselves, doing something that nobody else was doing at the time. Amazing, amazing. And it still stands up today. I still love it. Still listen to all these records. Number five, Wu-Tang Clan. Enter the Wu-Tang, yeah. 36 Chambers. Amazing. I love everything the Wu-Tang does. RZA is a genius too. I've thrown that word around a lot, but these guys are visionaries beyond what normal people do. Like, Nas is a great rapper, but he's not what Kanye or RZA are. And RZA's like maybe the sixth best rapper in Wu-Tang. It's not even about that. He's the orchestrator. He's the guy that pulls it all together. And if you've done anything with that many egos, that's not an easy thing to do.
No.
When you got to go tell Ghostface Killah, you're not on this song. There's just not room for you. You got to have some clout, and you know they listen to him. So props off to that guy and what he's done. He's directed movies. He's done soundtracks. Like, there's nothing he couldn't do. If he said he was going to cure, you know, the coronavirus, I wouldn't think he might could do it if he could fit it in a schedule. That's the RZA.
Yeah.
So that's my five.
Those are pretty good. I'll throw for me. I think I would put Buddha Cake State by De La Soul. It's my favorite De La Soul. I think we're on the same. We like a lot of conscious
Yeah,
hip
yeah,
hop.
and I loved. I mean, Tribe Called Quest is one of my favorites. They don't
Guru.
make the five, but
Yeah, there's a lot. There's so many honorable mentions.
yeah, it could go on and on. And I love rap. The first rap song I ever heard was "Rapper's Delight." This kid John Moon up the street bought the 12-inch when it came out, and it was on the radio. It was a song you knew, you heard it. But I was like, I gotta borrow this record, and I played it over and over. I knew every word, and it was a novelty song, but I was like, what is this? And I've just loved rap ever since. I mean, I heard rap before I heard punk rock. You know what I mean? It's like it's ingrained in me. It's like I'm almost 60 years old. How can you be grown up with rap? But I've been there, man. I saw it.
Yes.
I wasn't up in Brooklyn, but I mean, I've been following it. I was into Grandmaster Flash and all that stuff and Wild Style and
Dougie Fresh.
yeah, and the show. We mentioned all that stuff. Man, I love that.
We could talk about hip hop for a long time. If we talk about.
And some days Run DMC, like Raising Hell, that would be in my top 5. It varies.
Depends on the
It's
mood.
up there. It's on the bubble.
Yeah.
It's on the bubble. But talking about favorite records, I mean, it all started with rock, right? Because that's what it was. I grew up in the '60s. I mean, my dad had Johnny Cash. He had Ray Charles. He had very broad taste, and it kind of set me up for what I to love everything.
Were your parents some of your major influences growing up for music?
Absolutely. I mean, it was listening to music at home was huge. Like my dad turned me on to the Beatles, the Beach Boys, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Ohio Players. The list goes on and on.
Well, then let's get into your top 5 country albums. I'm gonna change it up on you.
Oh man, that's a tough one, man. I listen to a lot of country, but the country I like is the older stuff, and it's all like collections and stuff. Like I love Hank Williams and I love George Jones, but like some of their records aren't great. You know what I mean? It's like I love the best of what those guys do. So with country, I'm definitely not an album guy, but I mean I love a lot of that stuff.
Check out Willie Nelson's Redheaded Stranger album.
Oh, I love that record. That's a good
great
record.
Yeah.
That's okay. I love Willie. I love all those guys, the so-called outlaw guys and all that stuff. Like I said, Johnny Cash, my dad loved Johnny Cash, so I grew up on that. But I mean, like I'm a big, bluegrass guy, but a lot of that too is like a lot of it's like
it's the collections.
It's the collections and some of that stuff. And
check out Eric Church and Chris Stapleton. They're pretty close to the old school guys, in my opinion. I really like Eric Church a lot. He played McGuffey's actually.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well let's see. You got any guys out there top 5? How about top 5 jazz? Or is that more of a collection again?
Not well. I don't know. Let's see. I would say, well, definitely John Coltrane, Love Supreme. That's number 1. That's my Sunday morning album. That's going to church. I listen to that record so many times, and I love a lot of John Coltrane. But that's just like personally, that's like gets me started. So that's number 1, no doubt. Charles Mingus,
yeah,
is a great one. I love all the Mingus. He has so many great ones. Black Saint and the Sinner Lady is a great one, but that one, I just put it on and it just takes me back. I just feel like I'm in an episode of Perry Mason or something like that, and I'm running away from the cops, or I don't know what it is, but it just sounds like you're doing something, like you're involved in something that's from another time, but just so exciting that you just want to get involved. And again, Miles Davis, like I like a lot of Miles, but Kind of Blue, I think, is my number 3. It's one I go to a lot.
What do you think of Kamasi Washington?
Kamasi Washington?
Kamasi.
Yeah. Oh, he's great. He's done a lot of good stuff. And he's one of those, I mean, there's a lot of those younger cats that are still keeping that stuff alive.
Thundercat.
Thundercat is really good. Yeah. He does some interesting things.
All right. My buddy Tony Herman sent one out to me. Top 5 funk albums.
Oh, wow. That's hard because I like different Ohio Players records for different reasons. It would be, I couldn't even tell you like which, it would be Ohio Players would be number 1.
Well, how about artists? Top 5 funk artists.
Let's do that because, it would be definitely be Ohio Players would be number 1. And this is probably pretty obvious. I mean, Zapp would be number 2. Not so obvious. I'm going with Heat Wave at 3, then Sun.
Yeah.
Sun's not as popular, but I really like Sun a lot. Like they had a lot of really good songs. They were on Capitol, and they never really popped like a lot of those groups. Uh, but and then another little more obscure one is Platypus. I like a lot too. They only had two records. That first one's good. They mixed rock and rap a little bit. Uh, one of those guys is in the group Touch now. The Motown Sounds of Touch. He sings with them. Arthur Stokes. Uh, but there's I mean, all that stuff was so great, and it goes even deeper than that. But I think those would probably be my
Top five.
top ones.
Top ones. Do you want to do? Would you want to do artists or albums for rock, or you want to do both?
We'll do albums because definitely because
I'm saving I'm saving punk for last.
Okay.
To be honest with you. So
well
because I think you know what, we'll do this.
There'll be some overlap.
Okay, well then let's do this. Top 5 Dayton bands
I got
of all time.
I got you there. Be definitely these would be not only my favorite but also the most influential. And first would be Ohio Players. I mean, they didn't really influence me like in what I play musically, but just the fact that it's possible.
Right.
Like even when I lived in Alabama and we moved up here, I was a fan of the Ohio Players, and I did not want to leave Alabama where I knew a lot of people and I was playing sports and everything was great. I had a lot of friends. My dad's like, Ohio Players and the guys from Heatwave, they're from Dayton. He knew my buttons to push. I'm like, oh, really? Okay. Because I'd been in Ohio Players since my Uncle Varney put Funky Worm on a mix 8-track. My Uncle Varney used to make these tapes for my dad, mix 8-tracks. They'd just be red, and they'd have a label maker thing, and they'd have the title, some weird title. And he would and they would have the most, and we'd listen to these on road trips. My dad would have the cooler of beer there, open it up, slamming Miller High Life, little pony beer, driving down the highway, going to visit family or whatever, and putting these 8-tracks in, and it would be the wildest stuff, Allman Brothers and Ohio Players, and just crazy. And it really influenced like my love of just like mixed things together, which my dad loved too. So he was kind of pushing my dad's buttons. But my dad had 7 brothers, and those 2, as far as I know, were the only ones that really were like the hardcore music guys. And
so you got Ohio Players.
Ohio Players. Wait, where were we?
That was number
Ohio
1.
Players. Oh yeah, back to the favorite groups. Yeah,
from
the
Dayton.
most influential. Yes. So for me, it would be them. Then Toxic Reasons, huge. I love Toxic Reasons. That first album, Independence, is one of my favorite albums, and so we'll get back to it probably. But again, like I had not been into punk that long, but these guys were putting out singles. They put out a couple 7-inches. The album Independence came out in '82. And I would see it down its second time around and stuff, and I'm like, I had to save up, but I went back and got it, and life-changing, and Ed Pittman is a friend of mine, the singer, still, I love that guy, and he's still a guy in Dayton representing, and a great visual artist. Number 3, Dementia Precox, another huge influential group when I was coming up. They were industrial, new wave, synth, weird, like unlike anything going on, but great. They did a single in '81 and then an EP in '82 and an album, I think, of Unknown Pleasures came out in '85. But those were huge because there wasn't a lot of stuff going out. And to see like the opposite, because they weren't like Toxic Reasons, although they played the same show. They were weird, new wave. They had some catchy songs, some dancey songs, great songs. I still listen to that stuff all the time. So that puts us at 3. 4 would be Guided by Voices. I mean, they changed my life being involved with Bob. But just, I was a fan before when Forever Since Breakfast came out. I loved that record. When Devil Between My Toes came out, it was so different and weird and crazy. I loved it. And I've just been a fan. And the fact that I got to be in that band and play on those records, I mean, it's hard to believe. And it's paid dividends over and over. I mean, I don't know who I would be or where I would be today without that. It's simple fact. And I didn't do anything stupendous. I just showed up and learned some songs and played drums. I did the least of anybody or whatever, but I showed up and I did what I was supposed to do. And those songs are magical, and people love them today. And still, like if you go on the Guided by Voices Facebook group, knuckleheads are on there all day, just beloved fans. They talk about that stuff 24/7. This guy's in Japan and the UK, Australia, down the street. and they're all mixing it up every day, talking about Guided by Voices. Sometimes you get in trouble if you talk about something that's not related to Guided by Voices. They're serious, and that's a devotion that's like, you mentioned the Smiths before, but it's almost like the Grateful Dead. It's like it's so
Yeah.
unparalleled. Like those things don't exist. Like what the Dead did and the level of fandom they had, it's like it's unmatched. And Fish has had their own thing. Guided by Voices has their own thing. So, and then Brainiac. They were younger than me. I'd been playing music forever, but to see that you can just do your own thing again, plot your own path, and be so great and touch so many people. I saw him probably a dozen times, never less than fantastic. And just nice, sweet people with just the weirdest, great music.
Yeah.
So it was amazing. So yeah, those groups definitely impacted me, made me who I am today, and still, if I'm in a bad mood, like that's stuff that's going to cheer me up and put me in the right headspace.
The last 20 years, I would throw the Magi on there. Real quick, your top 5 rock and roll albums and artists if you want to mix them together.
Well, we'll go with albums. Favorite album? I mean, it could be all Beatles albums, but that would be ridiculous. So it's Revolver. I mean, Revolver is my favorite album. It does everything. I never get tired of it. I kind of wish sometimes Yellow Submarine wasn't on it, but that's a small thing. It's amazing. It's every song is great. And after that, it would probably be Abbey Road, but I just love Revolver's the one. Quadrophenia by The Who was number 2. That record is like a best friend to me. Like as a kid, in my room, feeling misunderstood. I'm like, Pete Townsend, he gets it, man. Like Pete, yes, he's my soul brother for sure. Like that guy, like touched me like few songwriters have. And that record is it's about growing up and finding your way in a crazy world. And the songs are great.
Yeah,
and
I
they
love
just
that album.
rock so hard. Tommy gets all the press, and Tommy's good. To me, Quadrophenia is the one, hands down. And these are all like, okay, yeah, you like famous records or whatever. But these are the ones. I mean, these are the ones that did it for me. It's Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. Like, I love the Beach Boys. I loved all the surf stuff. But when I heard Pet Sounds again, it's like this guy is singing to me. He's saying what I can't say.
Right.
It's like I'm just out of place. This kid is moving around because we moved a lot. My dad was in the newspaper business. Every 3 years, he was in this new town, so you make this new bunch of friends, and we bounced around Alabama, and then we came up here. And I'm still friends with the same guys I went to high school with.
Yep.
We're on a text chain, and we hear from each other all the time. So. But I don't even know any of those people from, the other places because you don't have time to build these connections. So records were very important to me, man.
They were your best friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Pet Sounds just again, and it's so magical. And I hear it today and I get chills, man. It's just magnificent. Like to do that, one man came up with that. I'm like, I don't know how you did it, man.
Yeah.
Stupendous. I'm going to get into the punk thing a little bit because The Clash is, again, just life-changing for me. When I heard that first record was amazing, and I love that record, but the London Calling to me is the one. It hit me at the right time. It's a double record. It's got blues, reggae, ska, a little bit of everything, soul. Like, they do it all, but it's a punk record. And they're so great. They wrote great songs. They had great hooks and like great guitar solos. Seeing the Clash was one of the greatest things ever, probably for me.
I saw them at Hera, 83.
And just so amazing. So amazing. And then number 5, I'm going to go with Murmur by REM.
Oh, yeah.
Again, life-changing for me. When that record came out, I grew up a guy infatuated with the British invasion. And all the punk stuff I liked was mostly the British stuff. And, I mean, I love Dylan. I love the Byrds, like CCR, as I mentioned before. I mean, there's some of that. Like, obviously, there's great American music, but the stuff that really hit with me was all the Brit stuff. So, like, when REM came in, and they had some of those weird, like, Gang of Four and some of that weird British influence anyway. So it kind of bled over into what I was doing. But they were very American, and they were proud of that fact, and they wore that on their sleeves. And then it was like the Violent Femmes, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, there's the Circle Jerks and Black Flag and the Minutemen. And yeah, I mean, it just goes on. And I know you mentioned the Minutemen before, but that's a group that never will get enough recognition.
Them and the Hoodoo Gurus of the '80s are two bands that are very underrated in their musical influence. Hoodoo Gurus from Australia,
Yes.
a surf punk.
They're
band
good.
from
Yeah,
Australia.
yeah. That one record, Mars Needs Guitars, was out when I was courting my wife, so that was a very popular record.
I saw
Courting.
them. I saw them 4 times in Virginia Beach. Yeah. Okay. Well, here's my final question for you. I've asked everybody this question, and I don't think I've gotten a straight answer yet, except from Sharon Lane.
Ooh.
Is there that one song that is just like your favorite song? Like, no matter what kind of mood you're in, no matter where you are, when you hear that song, you have to stop what you're doing, turn it up, and just let it play.
It's hard to say because like I don't have a favorite like Beatles song or a favorite Who song, and I'm a song guy. But that's so hard for me to pin down. Like, you know, on some days I'm going to go with "Sad Eyed Lady of the Lowlands" by Dylan because
Oh,
that song is magnificent, and I never hear it without just like freaking out. And that could be my favorite song because it's just amazing. So I'm going with that. That's my favorite song.
that's good because you know what? Nobody's ever asked me because I don't have an answer either. So
Today it's "Sad Eyed Lady of the Lowlands," and I haven't heard it today, but that's what I'm going with.
I will tell you that my favorite album of all time is the Beastie Boys' "License to Ill," because it happened right at that moment where I was getting into girls
Yeah.
and all this stuff. And Paul Revere and the "Hold It Now" is two of the best hip hop songs.
Oh man.
Anyway,
That break, that "Hold It Now, Hit It" break is just one of the most genius things ever.
Yeah.
It changed music really. Those kids just figured that out, and that was the Beastie Boys. That wasn't Rick Rubin. Like,
you know that what that beat was on Paul Revere was him playing the tape backwards.
yep,
That's some crazy stuff. Don, thank you so much.
absolutely. Thank you.
I'm so honored and humbled to have you here. For those of you who don't know, please look him up on Facebook, Wikipedia, wherever you can find anything out about Don Thrasher. He has an amazing, amazing story in life, and we've just touched on it barely today. You know you're more than welcome to come back anytime. Thanks once again to Tony and Fresh Air Entertainment.
Absolutely.
And thank you to Don Thrasher.
Jimmy, thank you.
And thank you to all of you for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification button. I love you guys. Peace till next time.